It's another day in the Westminster playground. Let's begin. The article says that Boris Johnson today accused Rishi Sunak of talking rubbish as their extraordinary war of words intensified. The ex-PM hit out at his successor for alleging he had wanted to bend the rules to dish out honours to his MP pals. Mr Sunak this morning, though, said he was not prepared to overrule the appointment's watchdog, Hulak, despite Mr Johnson's demands. He said, Bojo had asked me to do something I wasn't prepared to do, and if people don't like it, then tough. But in an escalation to their growing feud, Mr Johnson this afternoon fired a missile back at his former Chancellor. He said Rishi Sunak is talking rubbish. To honour these peerages, it was not necessary to overrule Holak, but simply to ask them to renew their vetting, which was a mere formality. MPs, including former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries, Alok Sharma and ex-Minister Nigel Adams and Alistair Jack were expected to be on the peerage list revealed last week, but did not appear. Both Dorries and Adams followed Mr Johnson to quit, or I think they quit first actually, but anyway, as MPs, saying it was a stitch-up, and it has given the PM a huge headache of 3 by-elections to try and hold on to seats. And whips are expected to fire the starting gun on the contestants as soon as this week to get the election done before the summer. Well, of course, as Boris has been Prime Minister a lot longer than Rishi has, you'd think that he'd presumably know a lot better about actually what needed to be done to get the peerages through. I think actually it's more of a case of Rishi actually wanting to hold on to those MPs, because remember, they didn't actually quit, as far as I'm aware, until they found out they weren't on the list. So decided to give them the virtual middle finger and resign immediately rather than wait for the 2024 general election. Which, to be honest, I'm guessing that Rishi probably didn't expect them to do. But of course he would have expected them to do that if they had to be moved to the Lords. And remember, Nadine Dorries actually has a 25,000 seat majority in her seat, so no wonder why he actually wanted to hold on to her. And speaking of that 2024 general election, Rishi's going to have a bit of a hard time in general, isn't he? Because let's face it, he has about as much charisma as a potato does, but unlike Keir Starmer, he doesn't actually look like one in my opinion. Either way though, I think the Conservatives would have done much better if Boris was still Prime Minister. I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, but no matter what you think of Boris, he is actually quite a good vote winner. And I personally do feel that there has been a bit of a witch hunt against him, not just because of Partygate of course, but because a lot of people out there, mainly Ramonas, which let's face it, there are quite a lot of MPs in there who didn't like the fact that Boris actually tried to do the best he could with polishing Theresa May's turd of a Brexit deal and actually trying to give the public what we voted for, which I'm guessing those MPs probably didn't like too much. So I think if anything, this has got more to do with Brexit than it has with Partygate. And of course, Labour wanting to get into power next year. In hindsight, and hindsight is of course a wonderful thing, I think we would have been much better off going down the no-deal route and then negotiating with the EU as a third country. But of course, it did seem like quite a lot through the Brexit negotiations, Ramona MPs did try to tie our hands a bit, and therefore surely us siding with another country, or actually organisation, rather than our country in my opinion, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the olden days, like King Henry VIII's days for example, I don't think he'd have been too happy with that. And who knows, may have hung some people up by their balls or whatever. But either way, Harriet Harman in my opinion, as she's previously said, something like she thought Boris was guilty before she was either chairman or chairwoman, of the committee, then she should have not been the chairperson, should she? It should have been someone else, because if anything, that, along with of course any other person in that committee who voiced their opinions about Boris before the showdown took place, and then maybe, just maybe, Boris might have been given a fighting chance. Rather than of course the chance he did have, which in my opinion was like trying to escape a fart from a lift, but if the lift was buried 20 feet underground. And whilst, yes, he could have stayed on, then have gone through what would have been quite an embarrassing vote in the House of Commons, it was rumoured that they were going to want or request a 20-day suspension, which would have caused a by-election anyway, and would have massively damaged Boris's reputation, a lot more than what it has been already. It had been seen as a lame duck or something like that in my opinion, when he's actually far from it. And as I said earlier, he is quite a good vote winner. So when will we see Boris back? That is the question. I personally think that it'll be in a few years' time after Rishi's successor, because let's face it, he probably is going in 2024, but after he, or she, messes up, and then Boris might then try to throw his hat in the leadership contest. But of course, to do that, he would need to become an MP again. And there has been rumours that he might take Nadine Dorries' seat. But I guess time will tell. I mean, Jacob Rees-Mogg wrote a thing in one of the newspapers over the weekend, saying something like Boris will be back as a Conservative leader one day. But then again, of course, Nigel Farage reckons that Boris has burnt his bridges with the Conservative Party and has opened the door up to him with reform. But personally, I don't think Boris has burnt his bridges, because if they do really badly at the next general election, which to be honest, under Rishi I think they will do, they might actually have a change of heart and then be quite welcoming to Boris. But then again, we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? Either way, I should be back soon, so make sure you click that subscribe button down there so you don't miss my next video. I'll see you in the next one.